Hey, how's it going? Preps here, and welcome back to another Marvel Strike Force video. And in this video, I'm going to be going over my opinions on the upcoming character Kahhori, while comparing her directly to the most recently released legendary character, Shadow King. I'll be going over their stats, their kits, and then I'm going to talk a bit about legendary trials and why I think that the current setup causes huge problems for new and mid-game players. Alright, let's get into it. Okay, so as I'm going through this comparison, I want you to keep in mind that Kahhori is just a regular character, while Shadow King is the newest legendary character in the game. So there really shouldn't be any comparison, right? Well, let's start off by looking at their stats. Now, I know stats aren't everything in a game like Marvel Strike Force, but they are important. These stats are calculated at level 100, gear tier 19, purple ISO level 3 with 5 yellow, 5 red stars. And we can see that Kahhori has a fair bit more health, damage and armor than Shadow King, while Shadow King has slightly more focus and resistance. He also has a beat on speed at 125 compared to Kahhori at 122, but once we have a look at their kits, we'll see that this is less of an issue than it seems, and for that reason, Kahhori wins this round. Moving on to the kits, and when looking over their abilities, I'm going to be largely ignoring the parts of their kits that are specific to certain game modes, because we want to see how good the character is outside of their intended game mode. First, we'll start off with Kahhori's basic ability, Sky Blast. Attack primary target for 200% piercing, plus 50% drain, plus 5% of the target's max health. If the primary target is a minion, attack for 30% of the target's max health instead. Flip 2 positive effects into negative effects on the primary target. If the primary target has exposed, apply blind. If the primary target has no positive effects, apply expose. Apply 1 charge up to a maximum of 3 to the chargeable absolute A-Force ally with the most health. Prolong the duration of 1 positive effect on this character by 1 up to a maximum of 2. When forced to attack an ally, does less damage, doesn't apply debuffs, etc. This attack cannot be blocked. So pretty average basic, really, not much to it. On to Shadow King's basic, Umbral Strike. Attack primary target for 270% damage, apply 2 bleed for 1 turn, mind control the enemy with the highest damage to attack the primary target. When forced to attack an ally, does less damage. I mean, it's close, it's pretty close, but I'm probably gonna have to go with Kahhori on this one. I mean, come on Scopely, Shadow King is meant to be a legendary character. That basic just doesn't cut it. For example, let's have a quick look at the basic ability of the last legendary character in the game, Old Man Logan. Attack primary target for 300% damage plus 100% drain. Apply Disrupted. If this character has claws out, instead, attack primary target for 300% piercing plus 100% drain. Apply Disrupted for 1 turn and 2 bleed for 2 turns. Generate 1 ability energy for self. Fill speed bar by 20%. If this character has claws out, this attack cannot be blocked or dodged. Now that's a basic ability befit of a legendary character, not this garbage. Alright, back to the comparison, and up next is the special abilities, starting off with Kahhori's special ability, Step of the Wind. Clear all barrier from all enemies. Attack all enemies for 250% piercing plus 30% drain. This attack deals double damage to enemies with Safeguard. Flip 5 positive effects into negative effects on all enemies. Apply offense down for 2 turns, heal block for 2 turns, and 2 bleed for 1 turn to all enemies. If an enemy does not have any positive effects, apply trauma for 2 turns to that character. Apply expose to all support enemies. Redistribute total health evenly between self and all absolute A-Force allies. Let's see how Shadow King's special ability, Shadow Ball, compares. Apply 2 evade and offense up for 2 turns to self and all astral allies. Flip all positive effects into negative effects on the primary and adjacent targets. Attack primary target for 300% damage. Apply trauma for 2 turns, ability block for 1 turn, and defense down for 2 turns. Attack adjacent targets for 300% damage. This attack gains 500% focus and is unavoidable. This one is actually a little bit closer, but I'm still gonna have to give it to Kahhori. The piercing attack on all enemies with buff flips and good debuffs on such a low cooldown with 30% drain makes it the clear winner in my eyes. But Shadow King's special is still pretty good. Up next is the ultimate ability, starting off with Kahhori's Ancient Power. Attack primary and adjacent targets for 500% piercing. Apply defense down, heal block, disrupted and trauma for 2 turns. This attack deals double damage to enemies with safeguard. Fill speed bar by 100%. Alright, Shadow King's ultimate, Astral Annihilation. Reduce the duration of all negative effects on this character and each ally by 2. Heal self and all allies for 20% of this character's max health. Copy and clear all positive effects except taunt from all enemies to self. Attack all enemies for 550% damage. This attack cannot be blocked or dodged. This one was a hard one, and in the end I gave it a tie. Both ultimates are really good, with Shadow King's being slightly better in my opinion, but the fact that Kahhori's ultimate also gives her 100% speed bar, I felt evened it out. Lastly, the passives, and here's where it gets really interesting. Both passives are really good, and it's hard to choose a winner. Let's start off with Kahhori's passive. On spawn, after all other characters on spawn effects, fill speed bar by 200%. Attack the enemy controller with the highest focus for 350% piercing. Apply exposed. While this character's health is above 50%, this character cannot gain slow. The focus and damage of this character can only be reduced by offense down. Enemies with exposed have their revive chance lowered by 100%. It's a pretty good passive, but to be fair, a lot of it is gated behind wall. Let's check out Shadow King's passive, First Nightmare, to see how it compares. On spawn, gain Possessed. Clear Possessed from all allies. When this character, or when any astral ally has possessed, at the end of that character's turn, or when a non-summoned ally uses their ultimate ability, clear all barrier from the most injured enemy, attack the most injured enemy for 300% piercing, plus 50% drain, plus steal 5% of that enemy's max health and redistribute it to the possessed character. Characters that have possessed cannot gain trauma or stun. When a character that has possessed dies, apply possessed to a random astral ally that does not have possessed. Now, while Kahhori's passive is pretty amazing, most of the benefits are applied on spawn, so it's great for burst damage at the start of a fight, but has almost no benefit as the fight progresses. Shadow King's passive, on the other hand, works well for shorter and longer fights, providing a decent damage ping, health steal, and probably most importantly, immunity to trauma and stun. Overall, I gave this round to Shadow King, but I could definitely see an argument for Kahhori here. Okay, so that's the end of the breakdown, and while Shadow King has some interesting mechanics in his kit, the clear winner here, in my opinion, is Kahhori. She has better stats, a better kit, she's cheaper to build, but we're about to get into the real reason Kahhori is much better character than Shadow King, and that's the unlock method. To unlock Kahhori, you just need to play the game. Just by playing the game, you should be able to achieve a 5 or even 6 star Kahhori, with the 7 star easily achievable once she becomes farmable. You could even try your luck with some core orbs to help your progress. Shadow King, on the other hand, requires you to invest heavily into multiple different teams, just like Dark Dimension. In fact, for the Shadow King trials, you need to invest in just as many teams as you would to complete a Dark Dimension. But are we receiving a Dark Dimension level character at the end? Is Shadow King on the same level as characters like Super Skrull, Mephisto, or Odin? I don't think so, not even close. Now, I just completed difficulty 11 of the Shadow King trials, netting me a 5 star Shadow King. I got this done by taking the 5 teams required to around level 90 gear tier 17. It might not sound like a lot, but to put that into perspective, that's around 31,700 L4 training mats and around 375 million gold. This gets even worse when we take into consideration the amount of resources I would need to invest into these teams to unlock the 6th or the 7th star on Shadow King. For example, to go from 5 stars to 6 stars, I would need to take those 5 teams to at least level 95 gear tier 18, and I've heard that in some cases even that's not enough, but let's use that as a benchmark. To take 25 characters from level 90 gear tier 17 to level 95 gear tier 18 would cost roughly 10,000 L4 training mats and around 125 million gold. That's a massive investment for 1 extra star on a character. And to go from 5 stars to 7 stars on Shadow King, I would need to invest something like 26,750 L4 training mats and at least 300 million gold to take all of the required characters to level 100 gear tier 19. It's just crazy, and as a mid-game player still trying to put together raid teams and Dark Dimension teams, spending that many resources for a couple of extra stars on Shadow King just isn't viable, and is the main reason why my old man Logan still sits at 4 stars. I just haven't had the spare resources, and old man Logan is one of the best characters in the game. If I don't have the spare resources for him, I definitely don't have them for Shadow King. This brings us to the biggest problem legendary trials create for new and mid-game players. The investment required to max the legendaries is insane. But I get it, right? The newest legendary characters should be hard to max out. The real problem lies in the fact that the requirements are never adjusted, meaning that in 3 or 6 months' time, newer players will have to invest large amounts of resources into obsolete teams. For example, for me to get more stars on Old Man Logan, I would need to backtrack and invest fairly heavily into the Out of Time and Cabal teams, which doesn't appeal to me when we have Battle World teams as well as the next raid team just around the corner. Scopely needs to do a better job at managing the requirements for these legendary trials. Once a certain amount of time has passed since the release of a character, they should either lower the difficulty or loosen the reins on the required teams. No new or mid-game player wants to invest that heavily into old and, in some cases, obsolete teams. As a new player, you are already playing catch up to the rest of the player base. Investing massive amounts of resources for a few extra stars here and there will only set you back further. Now, Old Man Logan might be the exception here, as he's just an amazing character, but Shadow King? Nah, I think I'll save my resources, thanks. Well, that just about does it for today's video. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, consider subscribing. It really helps the channel out. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.